Murchison Falls National Park is regarded as the largest national park in Uganda, covering 5,000 square kilometers of land, known for its potential to attract tourists seeking to see a rich source of wildlife habitat and an amazing scenery. However, another side has seemed to elevate the protected area further upwards. Something lucrative, controversial, and economically viable, known as oil. A discovery that could put the park in extreme danger.
Among the worst that can ever happen in an area drilled like here in Murchison Falls. One, the dangerous or hazardous chemicals being exposed to animals. They eat it up or drink it up and end up dying.
We have two resources. If we are able to harness the two resources concurrently, why not do it and develop the country?
Murchison National Park was named after the president of the National Geographic Society in the UK in the 1950s and will certainly pave way to become the first ever protected area in the entire world grant exploration and production of oil. But should Uganda prepare for oil extraction in such an ecologically sensitive area? We try to find out.
This is our ferry where our vehicles are, and it is moving us from the Bulisa district, which is still Murchison Falls National Park, over there on my left-hand side with most of the people here, and we are crossing the Victoria Nile, which is the River Nile, to Noya district, another district, but still in Murchison Falls National Park, to the Total land restoration site.
When exploration stage comes, we're worried about disposals because oil spills can be very dangerous for the animals, can be very dangerous for the water, especially like Albert and River Nile.
That is the area where oil and gas is taking place. It's just maybe around 50 square kilometers. So it's a small area compared to the bigger Murchison Falls National Park. So you can't say that we are giving up the park because of oil activities.
Heritage was one of the first oil companies to test for oil, followed by Tullow, and subsequently Total E&P, which has taken over the Pakwach Basin.
Obviously, under the Heritage, we had a lot of challenges of overspeeding in the national parks and lack of communication from the stakeholders who are doing the oil stuff there. But with Total, we've seen a lot of improvement of attitude, better communication. They are giving better information on activities happening in the park.
Total E&P is ranked as the 5th best company worldwide and is presumed to have not only the exploration capacity, but also the ability for production in the midstream. For a park which has 51 species of birds, 19% of amphibian species, 14% plant and reptile species, plenty of animal habitats like giraffes, elephants, cobs, and much more. Environmental international best practices have to be adhered to, and we sought answers as to whether these frameworks are being adhered to.
The IFC standards are most probably the most stringent at international level related to biodiversity and environment. And this is part of our commitment, and this is what we want to do during our development phase.
Though Total E&P claims it subscribes to IFC regulations concerning the environment, it was visible that NEMA, the environmental watchdog, has to exercise its mandate to ensure strict compliance, constant supervision, and up-to-date reporting. However, their footprint on the ground leaves a lot to be desired, probably due to the lack of sufficient funds.
The money that we were generating was managing the protected areas, but there comes more developments, oil and gas, hydropower developments, mining, that are putting pressure on the existing equipment, existing staff, so the capacity is really overstretched. So the funds we are generating really are not enough.
There is no institution that will ever say we have sufficient funds. Even America is borrowing from China to develop itself. So the institutions, the funds they have, if they use these funds properly to monitor and inspect, a good job can be done.
NEMA opened an office in Masindi to ensure daily and routine monitoring of oil and gas activities in the Albertine Rapid. And that requires money, and we have money, sufficient funds to fund that office in order for them to be able to undertake their activities.
The waste deposit site for all the estimated 34 wells in the Pakwach oil field are 10 minutes outside Murchison National Park. Plant life at the site is totally non-existent. A picture of how chemicals are dangerously hazardous. It's not clear how many tons of chemicals have been piled outside Murchison. However, experts reveal that every barrel of oil drilled beneath Murchison will produce 0.37 kilograms of drilling waste.
We have a policy as an institution that all the wastes generated during drilling is taken outside the protected area. So there is nothing that is kept inside the protected area. So as they drill, as they generate the mud cut, the drill cuttings, as they generate the wastewater, they carry it out and contain it outside the national parks.
During the production, the worst that can ever happen is they allow the produced water to be accessed by animals, because it can be toxic, and these animals, if they drink it, end up dying or getting other health complications.
We have in Uganda some companies that have been licensed and accredited by NEMA to manage waste, and here we had Epsilon, a company that accredited and licensed by NEMA to manage waste. So in all our drilling sites, whether inside the park or in West Nile or in Bulisa, were all being managed by Epsilon. So they had a number of trucks for mud cuttings and liquid waste. So all the waste, be it liquid or mud, were either carried to Bugongo, that is in Bulisa district, or carried to Tange, which is in Noya district. These are the two waste management centers. We call them waste consolidation areas, where we manage all the waste, mud cuttings and the liquid.
Those consolidations areas have been approved by NEMA for the storage of the waste, while waiting for a proper and appropriate treatment and disposal to be ready to receive them. And this is what is going on at the moment as we are talking.
A place was designated, and EnviroServ is in the process of managing that waste outside the park, and it is within a confined area, and it is ferried under the law. It is transported out of the national parks under the law. It was taken out of the national parks. It is outside in a closed area, which is far away from communities and which is far away from the national park.
The other day I was in South Africa. They have waste containerized areas. They have landfills, which they have put the waste. So, when the environment is protected, those containerized areas and landfills are engineered to protect the environment. How do you say we are polluting? That's the use of engineered containerized areas, engineered landfills, so that there is no contamination to the environment.
It should also be noted that Total, not NEMA, advertised, and a tender was given to a waste company known as EnviroServ, which is on the same building Total headquarters are found. Waste chemicals outside the park are interpreted as toxic, and Total officials insisted we could not enter without proper gear due to the danger the area poses to humans who are not safely protected, so we took shots outside the enclosed site. It's the first time Total is drilling in a national park setting, and one wonders if the fifth biggest oil corporation could be taking advantage of Uganda's weak environmental laws.
Before we take up and conduct any operations in the field, we have to get an approval of environmental impact assessment. We conduct those surveys, we submit that to NEMA, and if we do not have the approval, we cannot conduct those operations. So there are very strict process to allow us to conduct operations in the area.
It is not correct to say that there is not sufficient law to regulate companies. There is, besides, companies, these oil companies are not local, they are international companies. They are bound by the laws of their own country. They have interest in ensuring that their activities in Uganda are compliant with the Ugandan law. Otherwise, their stakes on the foreign exchange, on the stock exchange, will drop. So it is not just a matter of coming to Uganda, degrading and going away because there's not sufficient law. There are regulations, there are guidelines, there are legal regimes that are existing, and to this end we've not had any accidents in oil and gas exploration and development activities since activities started.
So as of now, that law is sufficient. And that's what you have to appreciate. We only need to amend it or update it for the future where we are going.
Uganda environmental laws stipulated in the Petroleum Act and Oil and Gas Policy are too general and weak to penalize oil companies that deviate from strict ecosystem standards.
As a conservationist who is at the same time interested in seeing our country developing, if an operator, oil company operating is contravening the law, he is informed and he has to carry out what you call remediation of the wrong. If he becomes stubborn and he does not conform to the required specifications of the law, then I would recommend withdrawal of license.
Uganda is a sovereign country. We wouldn't have to borrow laws from other countries to manage our country or our affairs. But where our law is not sufficient, we can refer to another law that is existing and illegally that is accepted.
Petroleum exploration activities came in Uganda or came on board at a time when almost all government sectors are not really prepared for it in terms of legislation. But amendments have been done. We have now the petroleum law, which takes on concerns about flaring. There is zero flaring. There is zero tolerance to flaring in the petroleum law.
Withdrawing the license, that is if you fail to remedy. If you fail to remedy what you have done, then consideration is made to revoke the license. And whoever has issued the license, in our case that's the minister, can revoke the license. So the Petroleum Act provides for that.
Canada raised the bar higher when it created a law that restricts oil investors from drilling oil in the protected area. The Petroleum Exploration and Production Department says although the available laws catered for the exploration stage of the oil resource, better laws are in the offing to regulate the production phase. Although this has taken a longer time, thus the delay in production.
Murchison Falls probably is going to be the first major national park if you leave out conservation areas, because there are conservation areas in Europe where the production is taking place.
There is an opportunity for growth of tourism, but at the same time we have to make sure that the ecosystem is not destroyed and the place remains with its beauties.
There needs to be secure safety nets and safeguards whenever there's an oil extracting operation, to make sure that the indigenous communities that live around there, the biodiversity, the flora and fauna are protected, while at the same time pursuing economic interests that would also benefit the communities. So
it would be very, very good to exclude oil activities from our national parks. But our case is a bit unique because in Canada they have the oil is almost in all over the place. But for us, oil is just in a specific area, and that specific area is where we have our national parks. So that there is that coincidence, that interface between oil and conservation, which is a bit unique phenomenon in our case. So for Canada, they could afford to say, let us leave this area and go to another area, which is a bit difficult in our case.
To avoid the frustration, Total E&P introduced a cableless technology that would associate with conditions of an environmentally legal protected area. Total E&P has invested close to $2 billion in creating such technologies. Though Heritage, a former oil company, is accused of flaring, Total has avoided one of the worst methods of testing oil in the park by using the 3D cableless technology onshore.
If there is any gas coming off with oil production, we do not, as conservation, wouldn't encourage flaring in the national park. And Total, they have tried their best to ensure that the environment is protected in here.
We shall use the best technology to ensure that the park is not impacted. And if the park is not impacted, then the animals will be least affected. I don't say they will not be affected at all. But
this is the first time we're using this technology in Africa, and it was being used in Uganda, and particularly on Murchison Falls National Bird Park because of the sensitiveness of the site. So in this technology, we had this dynamite or said cable, kind of, they are cableless, where we plant down and you just step on them to go down to capture the information that we want. And in that we also had two tracks, like one track vibrating, another one with the computerized system to record the data that are being vibrated and coming out from underground. And in that we had only, instead of having this traditional way of digging trenches and laying wires, we had this technology to avoid disturbing animals. You know, when you dig many trenches and lay many wires, that means each time the animals are moving, they're either getting trapped by these wires or falling into the trenches. And we operated very perfectly well.
We have conducted during the exploration phase a 3D seismic acquisition. And we have chosen to bring in the country, first time in Africa, a cableless technology which has ensured us as an oil industry to conduct our operation, but also to make sure that there is no impact on the environment.
The Petroleum Exploration and Production Department is using the directional drilling. Directional drilling is where you have oil like here, but you can access it maybe some 500 meters away from the site where you have it, even 1 kilometer. So that if they are to drill in a sensitive ecosystems, they don't have to put the rig in that place. They can put a rig away, but drill directionally and come and access a structure which is in a sensitive ecosystem.
we are working with the industry to make sure that the footprint is reduced. One, by using fewer drilling pads. And the proposal now that the companies have made is contained in some of the field development plans that they have submitted, and they are planning to use more wells on a drilling pad.
Though technology could try to minimize the dangerous effects of drilling oil, Murchison Park will surely never remain the same after. Experts, however, argue that the two resources can coexist without compromising the other. Tourism is steadily growing at 21%, contributing $1.8 billion to the economy, while oil revenue is expected to raise a whopping $150 billion and more for the government.
If we can harness the two and we maintain the two, why should we suffocate the other one that we want to promote this, when actually we can harness both and keep both of them? When the oil industry is finished, we remain with the tourism.
Tourism revenues have been growing at 21% per year without any investment. But now that we're going to invest in it, it's going to be an amazing opportunity for us.
I would say that revenue of tourism is sustainable. Revenue of oil, of course, it's great money, but you have to be careful because the oil is not going to be there forever. Well, if you take good care of your environment, then tourism can be there forever.
Oil as a resource, when it was explored in the country, it was a bit unfortunate for us as Ugandans that it was most of the prospective areas coincided with ecologically sensitive areas. All along the Albertine Graben has 5 national parks, and 8 wildlife reserves and a number of community wildlife areas. And since Botany Garden is the most prospective, and you know oil resources, the very best stimulus for economic development world over, it was very difficult to say we do not exploit this resource from the subsurface. What became important is how do we exploit this resource without compromising tourism sector or conservation per se.
If you look at the oil sector, we are told we will be getting revenue from oil for the next 25 years. That is a very short time. Tourism is a long time. But in terms of the money generated, the money from oil, it will be a bang, it will be too much. So if you look at comparing the two, might be very difficult.
But international tourists who have been surveyed by a company called Safari Bookings and international tour operators report that travel to Africa over the last 6 months has declined between 30 and 70% on the 500 operators surveyed. That clients looking to come to Africa may have changed their mind for this period and gone to other areas like Southeast Asia or South America.
It's estimated that beneath Murchison National Park is 2/3 of 1.2 billion, which is equivalent to 800 million barrels and more. Where there is oil, gas is most likely. But it's not clear how many cubic feet of natural gas exist in the basin. The repeated fear and worry for conservationists is the prolonged drilling, which may push animals away, leading to increased poaching. During the exploration stage, however, animals could be seen at close proximity of the sites, probably suggesting that animals might actually coexist with the developments in their habitat.
I'm located in one of the biggest national parks found in Uganda, Murchison Falls National Park. But very imperative is this footprint here that indicates an animal was probably scrolling in this area in the last few hours, probably in the morning. It's possibly a lion looking for food or looking for something to eat. In this same area where we are in, where the animal was scrolling, it has been restored by Total E&P. And they marked that by creating and constructing a head setter titled there, Job East 3. The biggest question now is whether oil can coexist with the animals which have an habitation here, including the flora and the nature of this national park.
Yes. On a recent inspection, we found hooves of animals, meaning that where activities have stopped and restoration has taken place, restoration, I mean restoration of plants and animals, restoration of plants and vegetation, animals have come. Meaning, actually, restoration can take, that animals to a good extent can coexist with development.
8 families of elephants were radio collared to monitor their movements in relation to the oil exploration activities. And what we saw from the trend of their movements, we found that when for example, the exploration is here, especially like seismic studies, these animals tend to give way, they go away.
Yes. One, if you look even at drilling activities, there are pictures we have where giraffes are standing next to drilling wells, where elephants are close to the oil activities. So it is not true that animals moved away and are returning. The animals were there. Secondly, to say that the number of tourists has declined. I don't know whether you got that information from where. Our understanding is actually that the number of tourists for 2013 increased. That's the first one. I have a certificate in my office, which Murchison Falls won last year from conservationists.
With Uganda's population now at a staggering 35.4 million people and the needs of the country growing, it's argued that oil will be that natural resource we cannot do without, at the expense of wildlife which can hardly speak for itself.
During the production, the worst that can ever happen is they allow the produced water to be accessed by animals because it can be toxic.
The Joby field, the Joby Reef field, which is totally inside the park. It has very big reserves. In fact, it's the biggest find. We are told that it's the biggest find for which they have found in Uganda. It is underneath the Murchison Falls National Park. But I can't tell you the barrels. I think that one you can get it from people.